welcome to Code to Cloud, and I'm your host as always, Kevin Evans, and today I'm joined by an esteemed colleague of mine, Ray Kao. I got that right, Ray?
Stuck the landing. Got it.
Awesome. Ray, do you want to just introduce yourself quickly and what you do?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on the show. I am, in fact, Ray Kao. I am on the developer audience Azure Global Black Belt team, bit of a mouthful. And on our particular team now, we kind of cover the integration points between GitHub and Azure, and which case that kind of spins off and becomes the whole thing about DevOps and platform engineering and like developer tooling. And so it's a bit of a rabbit hole.
That's awesome. I mean, that's been a bit of a disconnect for years, right? I found, but we're seeing it more and more. It's everything starts with our Git platforms, right? Be that Azure DevOps or GitHub, right? So, I thought we should do a session, right, and get more deeper on GitHub, right? Because we've released so much for it in the past 12 months, especially with some of the Copilot functionality we've got. But do you want to just go over quickly, like? A lot's happened with GitHub, right, since the acquisition with Microsoft. I thought it'd be great just to bring folks up to speed of where we are, right, the elevator pitch, so to say. But yeah, I mean, what has happened, right, briefly since the acquisition?
Yeah, we were just talking about this before the call and trying to remember the timelines and things like that. It's only really been about let's see, it's 2024 now, acquisition around 2018, right? If we do the math right, that's 6 years.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so quite a bit has happened. Originally, when GitHub started, its whole thing was about social coding. So you could run your own Git server and whatnot, but there's not a whole lot of tooling around how do you really share in a collaborative way, other than the command line and using the Git commands, typical ones, commit, push, etc. So then GitHub came around and decided to kind of make it a social platform, just like all the things back in the early aughts, if that's what people are calling it these days, early 2000s, and creating a whole social aspect of creating comments and sharing code and having a full UI on the web around Git, and then it just blew up. Right prior to that, it was like SourceForge and sites where you can share free software, but you couldn't really share source code in the same way unless you're brought into a project and you had to rock the CLI and what have you. So yeah, it's changed quite a bit.
Do you know what, I'm getting flashbacks, Ray? You mentioned those names, like, and it's taking me back a little bit. But yeah, you couldn't really collaborate easily, right? I think that's probably a better term, right? Of making it, between teams, right? If developers globally, it was still source code servers, right? Sitting somewhere where people checked in and checked in code, right? And we had different versions, right, of committing code, right? Git's become the dominant, source control versioning tool, right?
Yeah.
I just feel like GitHub's brought that all together, or we've done a really good job at marketing, right, and making it easier, right? So, but yeah, I mean, we've released a lot of tools over the past couple of years, but one of my favorites is Codespaces, right?
Yep.
Like, I love the idea of this is the project I'm working on, and this is the tools and the dependencies I need, right, just to get up and running with my piece of code. But just didn't know if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I'll talk about it a bit, and then I can show a little bit of Codespaces to folks who might not have been experienced to it. So, I mean, first off, Codespaces is essentially like an ephemeral development environment. So with after the whole acquisition, we're trying to get back into developer-focused workloads. Codespaces kind of came about. There is a related kind of technology on the Microsoft side called DevBoxes, but we'll not get into that too much today. But the idea is, again, you can spin up a essentially containerized environment with all the tooling that you would need and attach your Visual Studio Code, or I think JetBrains is also in beta today. But essentially, you have a thin client, which is VS Code, and then you tunnel into this remote container environment that's hosted inside GitHub that provides you a Linux environment, provides you all the CLI tooling that you need. You can also configure with a configuration file any of the dependencies or packages you might need. So if you're working on a team, going back to that social coding aspect of it, we can go a step further. And instead of, here's a script you have to run on your laptop, hey, you don't even have to do that. Just hit click, create the Codespaces environment, and bam, you've got all your tooling that you need. and the repository of code that you would need as a project directly injected into that machine.
I mean, I love the idea of that. It's like a remote workbench that you can take anywhere with you, right? As long as you got an internet connection.
Yeah. And the great thing about it too is like a headless environment, so you don't need like the full
exactly,
UI.
right?
It's
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
lightweight.
No, I love the idea of that. So yeah. You got a demo for us?
Yeah.
Come on with the demo, right?
Yeah, I've got a quick one that I've been using as of late. Let me share my screen. Let me actually move this out of the way so we don't get in that trippy picture-in-picture situation we had before. Entire screen. That looks about right. There's always that awkward transition, right, where I don't know what I'm doing.
Where's my
in the instance.
screen? Am I sharing the right screen?
That's right. Yeah, so I'm checking the second screen. It looks like I'm doing it right. So yeah, on any given, let me blow this up because who knows what resolution looks like on everyone's screen. This is your typical GitHub repository, right? Nothing special in that sense. But these days, when you click on code, usually you would start from here on a given repo, and you could go to local, clone the project down into your local environment, right? But now you also have the Codespaces tab here, which allows you to spin up an environment very quickly. So this project here I have in the background is a demo environment for working with MLflow. So if you're in machine learning, you like to build your own models, and you want to focus on machine learning operations, this is a decent repo by bias aside to get started with it. That said, like let's say we're on a team of PhD candidates or whatnot, or perhaps you're a data scientist in a given corporation, and you have all the tooling installed here. I don't want to have to install it on my local machine again, because you might have lockdown machines, you can't install a certain version of Java. The list goes on and on. What I can do instead is I can just spin up a code space. So here I've already got some already running. I'll show one in a second. You can hit this plus tab and then it'll boot up a 2-core 8 gig machine, if I'm not mistaken, behind the scenes pretty quickly. All right. You can click that easy button and it'll go, but I want to just click on the ellipses here and just go new with configuration or new with options. And what this provides you is, using the machine learning environment as an example, you may be on a team that is running something fairly compute intensive. And so the default, again, is this 2-core machine, 8 gigs of RAM. So it was right there. You go all the way up to 16 out of the box, and you can kind of, if you're in a larger enterprise, account, you can actually request for larger machines. But, out of the box, you can choose up to 16 core, 64 gigs of RAM. So it's pretty good in that sense. And you can dynamically resize them. So if you start off with a 2-core and it turns out that machine isn't powerful enough, you can actually spin up one of these larger machines, still attached to the container environment, so that you don't lose any of the work that you've been working on, and it just provisions you a beefier machine behind the scenes. Okay. With that said, once you click on it, here in my Codespaces, I'll just create a new one just for demo purposes, and it'll run, boot off, and then it should normally, by default, open up the web version of VS Code, but I've got it configured to automatically open my local VS Code, like the full-on IDE, the installed app on my machine instead. I like the web version; it's convenient, but the problem with it, in my opinion, is that my hotkey muscle memory is very poor on it, so I'm just used to my local environment. So that works. Here's one of my pre-existing environments already launched here. I want to hide this message; it gets annoying. And this is attached to a GitHub Codespace already. It's attached to the instance called Fantastic Sniffle. And what you note,
I love
funny animal names, right? We're treating these, so you don't get confused, right, with any other instances you may be running. You'll notice right away that it's already got my user account from GitHub, that is to say, already deployed. And what happens behind the scenes as part of GitHub Codespaces is that it injects a scoped PAT token behind the scenes, which allows you only a certain amount of privileges to work on your given repository. And this is for security reasons and what have you. This is the one that I was booting up dynamically, showing up. And what you'll see here is that this structure here on the left looks like it's local on my machine. It's actually remote to the Codespaces container environment that we're tunneling to, and it's already provisioned or cloned in that full repository project. So in this case, it's a machine learning repo. It could be a front end web development repo. It could be a back end API. You and I, we work a lot in infrastructure, right? So this could be an infrastructure as code, Terraform, Bicep, Pulumi, the list goes on and on project. So if you're like, a traditional sysadmin kind of thing, there's no reason why you couldn't spin up this kind of environment with all the toolings already installed, all the latest and greatest, CLI tools here as well, to get started right away. Okay. What I'm gonna dive into next. So, coding aside, you can structure this however you like, of course. That's all up to you. That's just a regular repo structure. The cool thing about Codespaces, and this is where, again, depending on what your role is, you may want to fine tune and configure it. But you've got this outer metadata configuration file. I'll close the terminal here so it doesn't get in the way, and I'll collapse that. This is a Codespaces configuration file, or a dev container, really, configuration file. And what this provides you is a number of cool features that helps you to start up an environment very quickly. Number one, you can choose, of course, the base image to which you want to deploy. So this could have been a dev container base image that's tuned for Python, a number of different programming languages, or base like Debian or Alpine container. That's cool. What it would normally have out of the box is already the necessary material to run VS Code server. So that's the environment that we're running on, that we were actually remotely connecting to, that provides you both the web experience. So if you wanted to work in the browser instead, you could do that. Or if you wanted to remotely connect your locally installed VS Code instance to it, that'll also handle it on your path. Okay. Now the tuned environments, depends on the project. There's a Python node listed, a couple others. You can choose from those. You could also instead is dynamically create a new container image every time you boot up Codespaces. So instead of specifying image here, because this specifies just a container registry that you go and reach out to and download that as your base image, right? You could specify a Docker image file instead. And what that would do is it'll reference this Docker file here and build this Docker container on each and subsequent load. Now that's a little bit time consuming, a little heavier, but if for whatever reason you need that dynamic build, you can do so. Or you can just pre-build one, put it in your GitHub package registry, right? Or GitHub container registry, or Azure Container Registry, whatever you can reach publicly, Docker Hub to. Pre-build it, and then instead, again, reference the image, the pre-built image here. So you don't have to get the ones that are built by Codespaces. You don't have to get the ones that are built by Microsoft. You can build your own. In fact, here I'm actually referencing the base container image that I'm building based off the Docker file I just showed that's actually being served off of GitHub Container Registry. So lots of stuff to think about there.
I like that. Sometimes you don't know where to start, right? Or what good looks like. So at least there's something out the box. But as always, once you become more confident, right, then build your own images, right? Or bring your own images. Right?
Yeah.
So.
And I think that's a natural evolution of any team, right? New tools come out, someone finds the new hotness, and they're like, hey, we got to use it, but I can't install it on my local machine because it's locked down, blah, 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 or I don't know how to run the installer. No problem. Just reference this container image. It's got everything installed, and if it's on your machine, or Diego, who's our buddy out in Calgary too, if it's on his machine, who cares? It's just the same container image. You just ship it around.
Awesome.
Yeah. Just to kind of go through this quickly too, it's been commented out, but you have the ability to add features into Codespaces. That's a Codespaces features, right? So the idea of it is that there are pre-built container layers, essentially, that you can use very quickly out of the box to install tooling into the Codespace. So you want to add Python, Azure CLI, Terraform, instead of running, let's say, a custom Docker file like this to do all the install steps for that kind of stuff. With the base container images that are provided to you, you can just kind of plug in and install those features like very quickly, right? So that also helps to reduce build time. From a security perspective, you can also configure the ports that can be forwarded to your machine. So this kind of helps with like data exfiltration scenarios, or there are ways if you're, an evil genius. I don't know how to put it to get around it a bit, add more ports. But these allow you some like strict policies around which ones you'll allow open. You can also, so again, because it's centered around Visual Studio Code, you can also pre-specify these extensions that get loaded here on the left-hand side in VS Code here. So here, for example, I've got like the REST client by a gentleman Hu Mao, very popular, sort of like Postman, curl kind of tool right here built in. I've got the this one does not very well written or descriptive in terms of what it does. But this is basically the Polyglot Notebook extension, if I'm not mistaken. So it allows you to write Jupyter notebooks in a number of languages, not just Python, C#. You could do Node, Bash, etc. The Docker one, the Python one, and then of course Copilot and Copilot Chat are installed by default as the extensions to this project.
This is great, right? Like, so I speak to a lot of, I call them infra developers, right? And they don't know how to scale it to their teams. This is an ideal, what, like, because I always get asked the question, what do I need to know for my job? Because when I look at all of this stuff on the internet, right, and we've got all these wizards out there, right, doing stuff with code, it's intimidating at first, right, or overwhelming, right? Like, I don't know what tools I need. Am I doing it the right way? Like, what does a good dev environment look like? These were some of the questions that I asked, right, when I started looking at this back in 2016, 2017. But here you can just basically build a remote workbench, right, kind of platform. This is everything you just need.
Yep.
And also it's certified by security, ops teams, and everything else, right? So I love this. This is great.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, like, it's an easy getting started kind of thing. Like, you might have someone who knows enough to be dangerous. That's perfectly fine, right? It's not a lot of configuration that's here, but this does provide, to your point, folks who don't consider themselves developers, like, sysadmins who write a bash script. If you write a bash script these days, so sorry, you're a developer now, right? But
everyone's a developer, right?
Everyone's a developer, right?
Everyone's a developer now.
Yeah. But you don't know how to install it, or you forgot how to do it because it's been a while since you touched Linux, or you haven't used the tool in a while, or the documentation's changed, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't matter. Like, this is a very easy way and uniform way to do so. Get it done, push it out, you can share it accordingly.
So I love it.
Like level 1.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's Codespaces, at a high level. If I open up my terminal again, because that's the great thing about VS Code, and I feel like I feel like I use it more like a terminal than I use it like an IDE.
That's exactly what I do, right? I just, it's like my one-stop shop for everything, right? I just use it 100%. I love it, right?
Yeah. So here in the terminal, right, because I'm already authenticated, any changes I made to any of the code that's in here, I can just do the usual, git commit. So like if I mess around with my dev container JSON file, if I hit save, full on IDE stuff, I got all my git source control-y stuff over here. I got my terminal. I can just do, git add, git commit, demo, code to cloud, whatever, and then I can push. And I didn't have to authenticate, add a SSH key and blah, blah, blah. The PAT token's already injected for me because Codespaces did it for me on my behalf when I spun this up. I didn't have to do any of that. And that's now pushed back to the repo. So that's great in that sense. Yeah.
So, no, I mean, the amount of times I've wasted time just on getting authentication working is crazy, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, the other cool thing, if you're in an enterprise account, there's like EMU, Enterprise Managed Users.
Right.
So you can tie that into like Microsoft Entra. So the account that you're using is authenticated to that, which is then tied to a PAT token in your GitHub account, which then gets injected. Like, it's pretty neat in terms of all that integration that's been done.
So there's a single source of truth on the identity piece there as well, right? Because
I
know a lot of admins, it drives them crazy. They just want to, this is where my users live, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I know we were just wrapping up the Codespaces piece there. I don't know if you've got anything further on that. I did see you like mention GitHub Copilot a little bit right there in your build config. So
that's right. That's the next level. Like we were saying, Codespaces. So I'm done with it. I don't want to bore anyone. I've probably prattled on long enough about Codespaces. The next thing in terms of the experience of GitHub and like VS Code, Copilot, 100%. So
I can't live without it, Ray. It's it's such a game changer, right? And
it,
I
it
know
has
it might be
evolved so
biased because we
quickly.
both work for Microsoft, but
Yeah. Oh yeah.
my
Yeah.
code accuracy, improvement, quality control, whatever you want to call it, right, has gone through the roof just because of this tool, right? I absolutely love it. I've got nothing but love for it.
Yeah, totally. Regardless of where my paycheck comes from, I would be totally in on Copilot as well. But yeah, good that you mentioned the fact that we actually do work here and people got to take it with a grain of salt kind of thing. So, but yeah, I think it's so Codespaces first level in terms of unifying like your tooling, the environment. Again, if you don't consider yourself a traditional developer, give it a shot. Try it out. If you're in machine learning, if you got a PhD in like AI or analytics, or you're like a sysadmin, Codespaces to get started. Totally like easy. The next level after that is like, okay, so like I've got a repo and I've got this environment. Like I have no idea what to do, like the structure of all this stuff. So the Copilot part of it. So I want to just go off the cuff a little bit here, right? I'm going to mess around with my repo. Let's say I want to now pick on my infrastructure brethren, right? So I got an infrastructure folder. It's like I want to. I've heard about this thing called Terraform. I know I need to write Terraform scripts, or whatever it might be. It could be Bicep, could be CDK. Again, the list goes on. Whatever it might be. Let's just get started, right? So I've got GitHub. I've got Copilot. Now what? So what? Who cares? So with this, what I can also do, right? So there's a easy stuff. So I can go like, please write me a Terraform file to deploy an Azure resource group. If I spelled that right, I always say please to our robot overlords because when they take over, you know,
Whoa.
if they're taking names,
You
I was
want
at least
to be
polite.
up there, Ray, right? Like on the good list.
um, so I mean, it's pretty easy in that sense. Like this is just the first second you're using it, you're going to be asking it some basic stuff, and it does a really good job in that sense. Now, the harder part is getting it to know the context of the rest of your project. Okay, so there are different levels of this. All right, so the first one is just the chat. You know, write me code that does X, Y, and Z. It'll do that. If I go back to my infra example, okay, I can go to infra and I can create like a new file, call it infra.terraform. Poor practices, but just for on the cuff, demo, that's good enough. And so the code that it generates here, I can either copy it and then paste it. So if I hover over the code, it gives me some icons. It's a copy one, I can copy paste, or I can do the inject essentially into the file, and it'll do it. I'll show a command line one later. I like that trick too. But it's as simple as that, right? The next level from that is like, okay, I'm going to clear this out just to. I wanted to have some context in terms of like what repo is doing. So there are agentic capabilities. You hear that like agents, agentic capabilities. Sometimes they're called like functions or whatnot. But Copilot's got some agentic capabilities, and in this case here, I'm going to pick on the workspace agentic capability. And now what I'm explicitly telling it to do is, hey, take a look around in my repo as context to what I'm about to ask you, and try to make sense of what I've asked and if there's something in my repo that is related to it, or you can build an answer based off of it. So grounding it in the context of what I'm working on. So this is a machine learning repository. Okay, I'm an infrastructure guy. I want to ask Copilot. Hopefully this works. Live demo. I don't know. It could blow up in my face. Let's see.
Demo gods.
Yeah, because
My fingers crossed
language
you're right.
models, AI, all probabilistic, stochastic. So if I ask it 10 times, it might even give me 10 different answers, right? So who knows? Let's see. I want to run this ML project in Azure. Please, again, with the manners, please write me some Terraform to deploy to, I don't know, Azure functions.
You're so polite. I love it, Ray.
It's
It's like a colleague.
You never know. I'm just covering all my bets when it comes to the robots. So you see it. You can see it kind of thinking in terms of what it's planning to do, filtering through the resources, taking a look at the code that I've written. and it's getting an understanding. Okay, here's what the app is or probably looks like. It's probably detecting that it's a Python app, I hope, and then it's trying to come up with a plan in terms of pretty basic one in terms of how to deploy. Now, this is just the Terraform to deploy the environment. So if you notice what's gone here, right? It already knows that I've defined this me knowing Terraform and projecting my thoughts into what the robot was thinking. But here it's referring to the data
Data source
construct,
as well, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
which it again is mapped the name because I've already presumably created this resource already in the code that I have, and so it just assumes that okay, instead of recreating it or creating a new one, it's going to grab it by name. Here, I think I've got a storage account somewhere, so it recognizes that from what I've already written in a Python notebook, and then it's going to create some additional, resources on my behalf. So here it's the Azure function, the Azure App Service Plan, and what I like about this is that one, Terraform, great documentation, but I don't want to have to switch back and forth to like my quasi terminal, quasi IDE, and then to a browser to look at what properties I need to put in there. It's already covered what I needed. If it's missing some stuff in around security and networking, I can just prompt it again. It's like, hey, I want this in a VNet instead, or I have this address space or a subnet I already have. Can you leverage that? It can go about and determine and do that on my behalf too. So, anyways,
Do you know
what
what
I
I
can
like
do?
about this though? Like, I've seen some colorful Terraform manifest files in my time, right?
Oh yeah,
And I think folks forget that you need to just keep things simple because then, one, when you come back to it in 6 months, you're able to pick it up, right? And two, why over engineer something when you don't have to, right? So, like you said, it's a pretty simple one, but I'm a big believer in keeping things simple, right? Just because one, it'll do the job anyway, and two, just from a manageability point of view, it's just why wouldn't you do that, right? Why wouldn't you want to make your life easier? And I like the fact that GitHub Copilot sort of advocates that, right? So
hmm
lowers the entry barrier, probably what I'm trying to say.
oh, quite a bit, yeah. Yeah, and like think about the speed up time from an onboarding, like lowers the barrier entry, and it lowers the time to the first commit or the first terminal command that you have to run pretty quickly. So imagine if you just hired a new junior grad from your local community college, university who knows enough, right, from their official program but hasn't had real world practical experience. This is another great way to get them started too, right? So yeah, I mean, this is sort of the entry experience in Copilot. I don't want to go on too long. Um, I think as early as this week or last week, I've lost track of time. But Copilot workspaces. So not to be confused, and we've had some internal chats about this.
I'm glad you're going to explain this.
Yeah, there's the workspace agent functionality in the chat itself.
Right.
My understanding is the Copilot workspaces, while similar, is completely different, right? So there's going to be some naming mishmash there. So if you ever see this come up, like be specific. Are you referring to the agent capability in the chat, or are you referring to this new product called Copilot Workspaces? So that said, Copilot Workspaces, which I'm hesitant to demo because I don't know if it works on my account because I've just got it activated. But going forward, and when you go to this code tab, you might have already saw it earlier if you've got a keen eye. So you got local. I've got Codespaces, which we just showed a second ago, and we've got this new Copilot thing here. You know what? Let's try it. If it blows up in the
Why
face,
not, right?
let's see it. Build me a Terraform module to deploy this ML model, right? And let's say start task. And so this is in preview. So what we'll do here is Copilot will again take a look at the context of my repository and take a look at all the things that I'm doing, and then it'll start building a plan. Now in this case, I don't have no evidence of Terraform module design to deploy provided files. The repository focuses on setting up environment for GitHub, so it recognizes that you got zero Terraform up in this repo, right? So couldn't understand the intent task. Okay, let's try this again. I currently have a Python notebook for ETL work, I think that's what I did. Is it possible to create, Terraform, module or scripts to create an Azure environment to deploy my Python, if I can spell properly, Python app to. You don't actually have to spell correctly too, by the way. It'll guess
Oh,
that.
I know. I'm like really dyslexic, and
Yeah,
this has just made my life so much easier. Like,
yeah. So no, there isn't one. There's GitHub Action, all this stuff. So it might be still determining. Yes, Terraform module script is now available in the repository. Are located in Terraform Azure. Okay, generate. So here it's taking a look. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about, right? Like it is determining on what I've asked it semantically. It thinks it understands. The first time I didn't give it any information. I was like, I don't know what you want, dude. So we tried again. It generates. It takes a look at the current state and it's like, here's my proposed solution for you, right? Like a good consultant. This is what we should probably do. All right, let's see what it does in terms of generating a plan. I got no idea if this is going to work because I've used it like once before.
This is awesome.
Yeah. And here, it's like just like it said in the specification. Here's the plan. I'm going to write a README about Terraform, what it does. Here's the what we presume the structure is going to be is Terraform folder, Azure folder, main.tf. Here's the stuff we're going to make, variables, outputs, blah blah blah. Here's a cool thing, right? It's not set in stone. Like this is a plan that it's devised. There are steps here. I can change this on the fly, right? Let's say I don't like the variables, define necessary variables, resources. I don't know what can I mess with. I'm going to mess with the README files. Like I'm going to add an item to this.
I was about to say that's probably a safer bet, right?
Yeah.
I just wanted
Also,
to point out that it's creating the README file and basically inputting some basic documentation there, right? What developer in the world does not want this, right? Like to me, that's just
it saves a lot of toil, and like I think
yeah,
that's the goal. And I think there's fear about it. It's not creative, right? There's no genuine inspiration or creativity, right? You still have to prompt it and guide it, and this is to implement. And another thing too, from a security perspective, like you don't want it to automatically execute on what it thinks. It's missing context. It doesn't have the experience per se, and so this is intervention by exception or intervention on purpose by a human to intervene in doing stuff. So, anyways, I digress. We made one change to it, implement selected files. So we can go to the next step, and here's where it's going to go and generate, and it's queued up to make the files, and we can commit it back to the repository. But yeah, that's sort of like the next evolution. There's a ton more stuff coming out. This has been announced, so it's in preview, so no one else got access as far as I know. Maybe a few select customers. So I'm not showing anything crazy that I shouldn't have been showing. There's already live demos on YouTube and such for this, but yeah, network error. I mean, it's in
always
preview,
DNS.
so
It's
yeah,
always DNS.
probably. Yeah, I don't know what it started to do something. Probably too many tokens, or the service itself is being overrun because it's in a
It's in preview, right? So
yeah.
still got his training wheels on.
Yeah, I can't wait for like an email or a message internally. It's like, hey, you probably shouldn't have shown that, but cool
Right.
stuff.
That'll be both of us.
Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, I mean, the experience of it is evolving, and this is where it's kind of interesting, right? Like, do I really need an IDE going forward? Because I can edit things all in here. Do I really need to, plan a lot? I can actually eventually, I think the idea is we can create projects, wikis, and things like that. Copilot will have context to it. So think of it like your project managing tools. Great, you do all the pre-work, you list all the things that you need in terms of requirements, designs, all that stuff, and then Copilot can take that as part of its context and generate information on that as well. So yeah.
So where I see this is, like you said, it's removing the toil steps or other extra steps that, well, can we get rid of those? Can
Yep.
we mitigate those, right? Just so we can get faster to, at the end of the day, right? Most developers are, like you said, you've come up with an ML workload, right?
Yep.
it's not to say that you don't care about the infrastructure, but you just want it to run, right? Or get you 70% the way there so it's faster to deployment. And I feel like that's where these tools really come in, right? And shine.
Totally.
Is
Yeah. Well,
faster to deployment. That's it, right?
the collaborative thing too, going back to the original idea of GitHub, like if I were, I'm not, if I were an ML engineer or data scientist or whatever the role might be, I might have no clue about infrastructure. Like I've heard of this cloud thing, I've deployed on my laptop and I run simulations, while I was a PhD candidate on my, Lenovo whatever machine that I could barely afford. I don't know anything about cloud. I don't know anything about infrastructure. I've heard of service, someone else has done that. My cousins in IT. But that's perfect because I focus on building the model, and then later on, when I'm part of a larger team, then a social aspect of it, I bring on Kevin Evans. Right? You can come in, help participate, generate the infrastructure files for me, all within here in the environment with all the tooling that we can continuously add together and have the exact same congruent environment.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So
Did I prattle on too much about Copilot? Am I?
no, you can never go. You can never talk enough about Copilot. It's just such a game changer, right?
Yeah.
I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of it.
Super cool stuff. Yeah.
It is really cool. Now, if we finish with that piece, we were going to talk about the developer's favorite friend in the room, security, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's important, right? And we're trying to, when we talk about if you think about the deployment journey, right, left to right, the first inception is code, right? So how can we try and secure our code, our configuration before we even got it to deployment, right? Because that's just going to save us lots of work on compliance, retrofitting, everything else, right? So GitHub Advanced Security, I got that right?
You got it 100%.
Awesome. What have
So
we got?
yes. So I'm not going to go through how to turn it on. We'll just presume that you've got an enterprise account,
It's just
and
the light switch.
yeah, boom, it's on. Once it's on, you'll get this new tab at the top here, the security tab. You notice that it's already highlighting 43
It's quite a lot,
problems.
Ray. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, it's a bad by design because it's a demo. But GAS, GitHub Advanced Security, has got three essentially core concepts: dependabot or dependency management, or some people refer to it as supply chain security. This will manage the packages that you depend on. So from an open source perspective, if I'm a Node.js developer, Python or React, and which is flavor of JavaScript Node, essentially, C#, list goes on and on. It can actually check what my software depends on, the packages, and if there are known vulnerabilities. In this demo that I've got here that I've showed other folks, it's a Java-based one. It notices that dependencies that I have a denial of service attack potential problem, marks the severity level. I can dismiss the alert. I can see what CVEs it's related to. It can give me a summary of the details of what's going on. It can show me the proof of concept in terms of the hijacking that could occur, when it was reported, how it could be fixed, and it provides me sort of the commit history of when did this dependency problem show up, right? When was it closed or completed, and when was it reopened? In this case, it was reopened on purpose because I roll back the demo from time to time. But you could have a developer who came in and re-referenced the same or reintroduced the same bug or security vulnerability, and then you can see, okay, who was it? Ray did it again. Which commit? How do we roll it back? Right?
So just looking at this high level,
Yeah.
What I also liked about it was, if I was in the security team, I could come in and read this and not necessarily have to be, an expert in that programming language, right? And there's also, the key CVE weakness, right, where it's actually pointing at, which is, to people who don't know, is basically I'm going to say industry or in like an international database, right, of security exploits, right, right, and you can come in here and you can search the number up and it will give you did you just click on the link and it took you straight there, Ray? Is that what you just did?
Totally. Yeah. So if you
you don't even have to go on a search engine, right? So you can just click on that and then take you straight to the database and it will give you some more information about it, right? Because
Yep.
That's how, security folks operate as well. So
Yep. So yeah, you just hover over. It's always the cool thing, right? Like this UI wise, right? It's not really clear in terms of what can just hover over some things. It's got to pop up. It'll tell you. You can link to other things. But yeah, click on it. It'll send you directly to the C. This is the CWE in this case. I've got other ones in here with the CVEs. But that's
right.
the general gist of it. I want to just take a small tangent because you mentioned on it. Like you're a security guy, you're not going to remediate the code itself, but you want to be alerted to it. You don't. You didn't write the app. I want to take a tangent. Microsoft Defender for Cloud, especially with DevOps security, right? There's integration between that. So the reporting that you get in GAS, I'm a cybersecurity guy. Put on that hat. I don't want to live in GitHub because that's not my workflow. I want to live in like a SIM or a SIEM tool. I forget what we're calling them these days. CSPM tool, right? All that other stuff. A rose by any other name is a dashboard in this case. But I get to see the same telemetry in those repos. I've got a ton of them now that have been onboarded. Which one was mine? Mine was an Arcade Gas demo. So if I click on that one, the same alerts will pop up, kind of thing, right? Here, high priority. It'll show me the high priority ones, what it's related to. Same similar information. Graph stuff. The UI is a little bit different, but it projects or soaks in all that information from there as well. So
And
that's my
that's what the
tangent.
Azure folks are used to, right? Is seeing this Defender for Cloud dashboard style, right? So
Oh yeah.
that's their world. But
Yep.
what is it? Is it a connector? Is that how it works? Is it?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah. So you can actually add it as an environment. So use like OAuth behind the scenes to connect via your identity originally or initially, and then kind of bootstraps that environment. There's a GitHub app on the other side that will basically on periodic, like a cron job, basically upload or send the Sarah files, basically the generated reports we see in the dashboard, into Defender for Cloud. But you can connect this to GitHub, Azure DevOps, GitLab even, right, and get the same telemetry that you would want to see from Sarah file outputs into Microsoft Defender for Cloud in this sense.
and does it just scan, dependency weaknesses, right? Should we call it like supply chain, right? That you were talking about. I do a lot of talks on software bill of materials, right? There's another
Yeah.
term, right? That's used.
Mhm.
But what about stuff like, I don't know, containers, that kind of thing, right? Because people just go to, Docker Hub, get an image. We don't know what's loaded in that, right?
Right.
It's best efforts at the end of the day, right? So
Yeah.
does it do similar scanning on container images, like a stored, deconstructed format, right? That kind of thing.
So there are kind of two places you can do this, right? There's under the Microsoft Defender for Cloud umbrella. There's also Defender for containers.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's once it's in the registry, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we call that container security these days. I know we've changed the name a bit, and I'm not up to date. I always refer to Active Directory these days as Entra, but then I also say like the artist formerly known as Azure Active Directory.
Like
So
Prince.
yeah, um, but yeah, I mean that's one area. If you live in this sort of cybersecurity dashboarding world, from GitHub, if I just go back, so this is the high
Yeah.
level. If you're CISO, CISO, and anyone under that org, this is probably where you'll live. Going back to developer experience, this is probably where you're going to live. And to that point that you just mentioned, if I just go to no, that's secret scanning.
You know where I was going with this.
I'll come back to secret scanning, and yeah. So you can actually include other scanning tools in GitHub, right? It doesn't have to be GitHub Advanced Security. Those other tools here, I'm using Gripe for container scanning as an example. It ultimately generates a Serif file, which is what these three here, like Dependabot, code scanning, secret scanning, does behind the scenes for you, and then uploads a Serif file to GitHub Advanced Security. At that point, what it does is that reads through, essentially it's the JSON file in that particular
Right.
file format or specification, and which generates this kind of reporting output, right? The criticality, the additional links, the text, and remediation things in here. So again, depending on where you live, this is the container scanning happening at the build time in your GitHub runners or Azure DevOps runners or whatever CI/CD tool runner you're trying to do. You probably want to live in there. If it's in the environment and you want to monitor it from more of a virtual machine, container level, at runtime, you might want another tooling on the sort of SIEM, CSPM, cybersecurity side of the house. So depends on where you're trying to do it. You probably were going to be doing it in both telemetry is going to be little bit different. The key thing I would say is there capabilities for you to get that information across the different types of experiences for a dev or a cybersecurity analyst.
For sure. I like the way that it's weighted as well, right? With critical high.
Yeah,
Because there's nothing worse, right? We talk to customers every day and they're like, but what's important? And we go, everything's important, right?
totally.
Sometimes you've got to you got to divide and conquer, right? All security needs to be tackled, but it's difficult, right? So at least you've got a severity label against these vulnerabilities.
Yeah, and it's risk management, right? Like, how critical is critical? You dive into this too. If it's in a non-production kind of scenario, even though it says severe, it may not actually be that critical because it's not exposed to public, or it's the vulnerability that it's exposing. It doesn't, pertain to you. So to that point, you can dismiss the alert. That's a false positive. It's only used in tests, meaning non-production, or we're not. I want to be lazy. I'm not going to work on this because it's not high priority, or whatever, right? So we could dismiss it. Alternatively, we could actually make it a big deal and then create an issue, which then we can tie to a project,
Right.
burn down, and all this other commenting stuff in line about what we're going to do to actually fix it. And then, again, from a software development lifecycle perspective, we're reincorporating this issue, excuse me, the security problem, as part of our usual, Scrum sprint kind of process, right?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I go back, I mean, the last couple of things I wanted to talk about from a security side, like there's code scanning, which uses code QL behind the scenes. It'll generate a database, like basically it's a graph of your actual code, so that you can get the capability of querying your code as if it were a full-on database, which it does become. It'll project that into a database, so you can actually follow, find variables of this particular type, that traversing my application, where they are not sanitized by SQL. I mean, that's not the actual code you write, but general high level, you can actually query for that. Are there things like that are occurring? And then you can detect for SQL injection. Have things been sanitized? Am I accessing memory in the wrong way, or are there parts of my application that are accessing memory? And then find where they are, and then do something about it. So that's code scanning. Check it out. I would also look for videos on bug bounties, because there are a lot of researchers that use CodeQL to search for bug bounties and get dinero out of that.
Side hustle.
Side hustle, why not? The last one I want to touch on is the easy one: secret scanning. I'm guilty of it. Like, I've made documentation, README files about, hey, this is how you would use the repo, and I would put an example, API key. Like, I mean, to trash it later, I may forget. It can detect it for you and stop you from doing it. Like, there's a reject even at the push, git
It
commush.
comes up in red, actually, doesn't it? It's like, don't do this, don't do this.
Yeah, in the terminal, you're like, error, like, what the hell? I've never seen that before. And then it'll tell you in the terminal, like, you're trying to push, whatever the key is that we've
Publicly.
identified, block you. It'll provide you a link in case, again, maybe it was intentional. You open the link in the browser and you can say, I meant to do it, or it's fake or not live, whatever. The point is that it detects it for you and it kind of stops you and gives you a chance to say, did you mean to do that? Right? Then you can circumvent it. And it can also, let's say you turn on advanced security, you wrote the code 5 years ago, you turn it on today, it'll scan through your repo and your commits. So if it's detected it from something you've done years ago, even though you've only turned on GAZ today, it'll still show up here in the report. In fact, all of these were I'm pretty sure all of these were alerts from the cloned repo that I had to just demonstrate this, before I turned on GAZ on this particular account.
That's awesome. I like that. So
Yeah.
it's even going back over previous history, right? Because it's
Yeah.
the stuff that you forget about. That could be the way that a threat actor gets in, right?
Yeah.
So
Guilty.
that's awesome. That's awesome.
Mhm.
Well, is that it, Ray? Is there any more you need to show us, or
There's a ton more, but I don't I don't know
we
what
could
time
be
of day
here for a
people are
while,
watching this
right? I
at.
just wanted to double check.
Yeah,
No,
we'll put people to sleep on another call.
I
That's
know, right? I
yeah.
know. So I love that, Ray. Like the three takeaways, code spaces. I just think it's such a great tool to get people started, right?
Totally.
Or for experienced developers, right, that just want to work anywhere. Like you said, right? Like take my workbench with me. And
100%.
then we've got GitHub Copilot, which I just feel like it's just been revolutionary, right, for everybody. And then we've got GitHub Advanced Security. Some powerful tools in there, not only just for the developer, but for the security ops teams on the other side on the Azure platform as well, right? So
Yeah.
it's when worlds collide, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's we've always said we need to bring security into the room. Well, they're in the room now.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many possibilities and integrations here, right? Like webhooks you can build right into whatever service you're trying to go to. There's integration with ServiceNow if you live in that world too. I mean, so many things you could do, but where to get started is another question. So
are there any key resources that you would recommend to people? Like getting started with GitHub, or I know I need to polish up on GitHub, right? Refine my tools or whatever, my approach and my learning. Is there anything that you would recommend?
Yeah, learn.microsoft.com. There are, I believe, there are 3 tracks. Last night, 4 tracks if you include just general DevOps in there in terms of learning paths. So there's DevOps in general, which will lead you to getting I think it's a DevOps expert certification from an Azure Microsoft perspective. Then there are the 3 GitHub specific ones around GitHub administration, GitHub Actions, and GitHub Advanced Security. I've got a video on YouTube which has helped some folks get the certification, because it's not a terribly hard exam, but there are like fine details and things to remember.
Nuances, right?
Yeah, nuances about it. So the Actions one, I think if you're on the DevOps side of things, the GitHub Actions one 100% is relevant to what you need to do. And then the administration side is more if you're the account owner, right? And you want to just hand out licenses, or where do you activate and turn on features? That's more without exam. So where you want to go is up to you in that sense.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So just on a final note, like where can folks find you online? You on LinkedIn, X? You said you like a couple of YouTube videos. Like, where are you, man? How can people reach you?
I don't have a very creative handle on most of the socials, so just Ray Kao pretty much everywhere. If you just find me on Ray Kao on GitHub, I usually post links on, if I go to profile for the various socials and what have you, that should already be included there.
There we go.
Yeah, Twitter there, or X, or whatever you're calling it these days.
I still call it Twitter. I had to just correct myself in my brain then when I was saying it.
Yeah, I'm one of those jerks that just won't change, because I grew up here in Toronto my entire life, and I still refer to where the Blue Jays play as Skydome, and I refuse to call it Rogers Center. So, but yeah, I'll do that. But yeah, totally. Here's a good place. I don't really use them too much, but feel free to message, and I'll probably check. GitHub, just get into one of my public repos and submit an issue just to bug me. That's cool too.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show. I feel like there's some real good content there, especially for folks trying to get deeper into GitHub, right, and using it on a day-to-day basis. I want to say thank you to our viewers again. If you like the content that I'm producing, if I'm getting the right rock stars on, such as Ray, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and repeat. But I'll catch you on the next one. So, bye-bye for now.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for having me, Kevin.
No worries.
Yeah.